Hi, my name is Rick Smith. I'm your police chief here in Wakefield. And today we're going to talk a little bit about victim witness protection and a victim witness program within the Middlesex County. We're very lucky to have with us today Shawn McMaster, who is the Deputy Chief of Community Outreach and Training in the Victim Witness Bureau over at the Middlesex County District Attorney's Office. Shawn, I'd like to welcome you this morning.
Thank you for having me, Chief.
Thank you very much. We've come a long way, and before we get too deep, I'd like you, Shawn, if you could take a couple of minutes and explain a little bit about you as a person and what you do professionally, and tell us a little bit about the great job that the Middlesex District Attorney's Office has done and does do in helping our victims of crime today.
Sure. I've been with the Middlesex District Attorney's Office for 11 years now, and I work specifically in the Victim Witness Services Bureau, where I've worked throughout my entire career at the DA's office. Currently, I'm the Deputy Chief of the Victim Witness Services Bureau, and I focus primarily on outreach and training, community programs, and raising awareness around a lot of these important issues. So in addition to that, I've also been a court-based advocate for many years prior to becoming Deputy Chief and working directly in the courts of Middlesex County with victims of crime. Prior to that, I worked at the Department of Correction Victim Service Unit, and before that I worked at a nonprofit organization. So I've been able to work with crime victims at the nonprofit level, the post-conviction level, and for the majority of my career, the pre-conviction level at the DA's office.
Well, Shawn, obviously District Attorney Jerry Leone has the right guy in the right job, because you certainly have a tremendous wealth of education and experience in this business. A lot of people think that when they think of victims of crime, they think of police officers, and they think that police officers go out, they do their job, they take people to court, and everyone testifies, and the bad guy goes to jail, for lack of a better term. But it doesn't work like that, and we know it doesn't work like that. And as a result of that, local advocacy groups have come together, like Wavv, the Wakefield Alliance Against Violence, to try to explain to our community and work with our community about what we do and how we do it. Could you go back in time a little bit, back to 1985 or 83? Actually, we're in the 30th anniversary of the Victim Rights Bill in Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
I was around then. I don't think you were. But if you could just talk to our audience and tell them a little bit about how the bill came to be, why it came to be, and where it has gone since 1983 to today in 2013.
Sure. Prior to 1983, there were no court-based victim service programs in Massachusetts, and really nationally there weren't many at all. Massachusetts really has been on the forefront of victim rights, and that was made pretty clear in 1983 by the passage of the Victim Bill of Rights, Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 258B. That was passed in 83, became law in 1984, and it basically did two things. It mandated that district attorneys' offices across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts create a victim witness services program to assist victims of crime during the court process. The second thing it did is it enumerated a number of rights as part of that law that victims have from the start of the court process to the end of the court process through post-conviction. So if somebody was serving a sentence or on parole. So these are rights that are very fluid from the start of the process all the way to the end.
We've made such a so many advances in caring and taking care of those who are victimized by crime. But a lot of people think that when we talk of advocacy for victims, they think of just domestic violence. And I don't mean to minimize domestic violence, but could you explain a little bit about the breadth of it? I mean, it's everybody that goes in as a victim that is brought into the court and is victimized by any type of crime. Your advocacy extends to them, correct? Is that whether it's a car theft or a homicide?
Yeah, technically under the Victim Bill of Rights, any victim of a crime is entitled to certain rights. A number of the rights pertain to victims of violent crime, and those are the cases which advocates are, for the most part, involved in. Beyond domestic violence, we certainly see a number of domestic violence cases, but like you said, there's cases beyond domestic violence, from stalking cases to sexual assault cases to harassment cases that we work on, breaking and entering, home invasion. It's endless. So, and we're seeing more and more identity fraud cases and social media being used as a way to perpetrate crime, whether it's against children, the elderly, or in domestic violence cases, using technology and social media to stalk victims, to monitor victims, to control them.
In each court, there are advocates assigned, and when somebody is brought to court, a defendant is brought to court, the victim many times is brought into court. Could you explain to our audience actually how that works, and what would the advocate actually do for the victim from the beginning to the end? I don't think people understand that you're there for them as victims, and they're going into a completely foreign environment. Most people, thankfully, don't know what the inside of a courthouse looks like. Most people, thankfully, aren't victimized. So they really have no idea what to expect. Could you explain how that works?
In Middlesex County, we actually have over 40 victim witness advocates assigned to the various district courts, to the 2 superior courts, and in our specialized units. There are 12 district courts in Middlesex County. As I said, 2 superior courts. And then we have specialized units, a domestic violence unit, child abuse unit, and an elder and disabled unit. Under District Attorney Jerry Leone's leadership, that unit has expanded. Even in these tough budgetary times, we have maintained staffing levels and even increased staffing. For Wakefield, the local district court is Malden District Court, and we're getting a 3rd advocate there now. So if somebody, for instance, from Wakefield had to go to the Malden District Court because they are a victim of crime, they would meet one of our currently 2 victim witness advocates, soon to be 3, who would assist them through the court process. And what that means is letting them know what their rights are under the Victim Bill of Rights, which we talked about, trying to get a sense of what their concerns are, what their needs are, really trying to triage the situation. And the advocate then would inform the assistant district attorney, who would be handling that case on the very first court date, what it is that the victim feels, what their concerns are, whether or not they're safety concerns, whether or not there may be some other needs that they might have. The advocate then would focus on trying to align that victim with community services, whether or not it's with Wavv or with Respond or public services like the Department of Transitional Assistance or the Department of Children and Families. So it's really twofold. It's assisting victims through that court process, making sure that victims are aware of their statutory rights under the Victim Bill of Rights, making sure that they're informed throughout the court process, that they know what's happening before it happens, that they know what things mean. The court process can be very confusing. The terminology is not easy to understand. So advocates are there really to explain to victims what things mean in a way where victims will understand. And the skill base of advocates is really important. And probably the most important thing is communication skills, because you need to understand that you can't communicate with crime victims in any one way. People come to the court system experiencing trauma and a number of other issues, but also you can't communicate necessarily with a child as you would with an elderly person or with an immigrant victim or somebody with a disability. So advocates are really there to communicate with populations of victims who they come across with in their daily work in the court system, and really explain the process to them. Again, make sure that they know what their rights are. identify what their needs might be and try to align them with needs that will be able to, or services that will be able to address those needs over time. And then follow the case through the court system every step of the way, making sure that victims really understand what's going on, that they have a say in the process, that even if they disagree with something, that they have a voice, that they can communicate their concerns or a difference that they might have to the assistant district attorney, that they have a say in a sentencing recommendation, that they can be heard at sentencing in the form of a victim impact statement where the judge can hear directly from the victim what it is that that victim might want to see or what they don't want to see happen.
You just hit on 2 points, Shawn, that I find very, very, very important. First of all, the skill set and the training level of your victim witness advocates that work within your area. Could you tell us a little bit about some of the advocates? Where do they come from? What is their training? And how do they continue on in their training as they go through their careers helping people every day? One of the biggest issues that we suffer, and more in today's society, is language barrier. People from many other cultures many times end up in the court as victims. And the court is not only foreign to you and I in many ways, but to somebody who comes from another culture. Tell me a little bit about the training of the advocates and how they cross that barrier into other cultures that's so prominent today in this part of New England.
Most of our advocates have a background in human services, so whether or not that's studying psychology or sociology or public affairs, criminal justice, whatever it might be, which is certainly applicable to the criminal justice system. But beyond that, we're really looking for certain types of people. Again, people who can communicate well, people who are open-minded, people who are sensitive, people who are going to fit in well in the busy environment of a court system, who are really capable of working with multiple populations. And when it comes to the issue of immigrants, that's one thing the district attorney Leone has worked hard to do, is break down what we consider barriers against disclosure that any vulnerable population faces. And what we try to do is make sure that our office is representative of the communities that we serve. We have a Haitian Creole speaking advocate, we have Spanish speaking advocates, we have a Khmer speaking advocate, we have Brazilian speaking advocates. So we really try to make sure that we're able to communicate with our populations of victims across Middlesex County, one, to be effective, but two, to meet our mandates and provide services in a culturally sensitive way.
I'm very fortunate. I have had the good fortune to spend my career in Middlesex County. And Middlesex County has always been a leader in the advocacy, making sure that when people get injected into the court system, that they're provided the services that they need, not just mandated by the law, but above and beyond that. And DA Leone has been very, very, very proactive in that. He has obviously put good people in charge of the unit who can, foresee where we want to go. But one of the biggest pieces of this whole program is the fact that at the end of the day, the victim has an opportunity to speak directly to the judge, and in the form of the victim impact statement, which many times is so moving. The media capitalizes on it a lot, but it's much deeper than that, because that, I think, is the one time in the whole process that the victim has an opportunity to tell the judge exactly how they feel and the impact it has had on their family, on their finances, on their life going forward. Could you comment a little bit about that?
It's an important part of the court process, because you're right, up until sentencing, if somebody is, as long as they're convicted, whether or not that be through a plea, they plead guilty, or they're found guilty after trial, the victim has a right to be heard by the judge and make that victim impact statement, which is very important because the court will consider that before imposing a sentence. So what we try to do is make victims feel like they're heard throughout the process, by advocating for them and speaking for them, so to speak, during the court process. But that's difficult for victims because they want to be heard themselves. And it's really not until sentencing that they can appear before a judge and speak with the judge about the impact that this crime has had. Like you said, the financial impact, emotional impact, the impact maybe physically if there are injuries, the impact to families, impact to just their personal life. Maybe they're not able to go to work, or they're have to go to counseling, or whatever it might be. So it's something that the judge can consider as a recommendation from the victim.
Right.
So just as we're there as the Commonwealth to make a recommendation, and the defense attorney makes a recommendation for the defendant, the person who has been convicted of the crime, the victim has a right to make a recommendation. So in addition to how they feel and how this crime has impacted them, what it is that they want to see happen, or what they don't want to see happen. And it's also very cathartic for victims. It's an opportunity to get up there and ventilate their failings and have the court validate their failings. So it's an important right.
You know, a lot of people do think that upon conviction, the case is over, but we do have that gap between conviction and sentencing. And in my experience, it has been the time when when the victim can actually bring closure to this whole event, although it may never go away, and we know that, sadly. But it is a time when, especially when it's a highly charged emotional event that's gone on, they finally get that peace in their heart where they can say exactly how it impacts their life going forward. And a lot of us forget that, you know. And that's an interesting point because we've taken in the communities the lead from your office, and we've had the good fortune of putting together local groups. In Wakefield, it's the Wakefield Alliance Against Violence, and we've had the good fortune of having people from the DA's office, advocates, come out and participate in these groups. You mentioned Respond earlier. These groups, I think, on a local level, are very important for the people in town. Let them know their rights, let them know what services are available up until we get to the point where the DA's office gets involved. Does the DA's office have a good relationship or a relationship with these different groups around? Do they meet? Do they train? Do they share thoughts throughout the year?
Absolutely. The community partnerships are important to District Attorney Leone, and since becoming the District Attorney in 2007, there's really been an emphasis on building new relationships and improving existing relationships and working with organizations like Wavv. I've had the opportunity to speak with Wavv. I did a training in town here on the Victim Bill of Rights and on victim compensation and different types of rights that victims have throughout the process. So working with organizations like Wavv and Respond and others to raise awareness in the community. But we also realize that we can't, as law enforcement, you know this, Chief, work in our individual silos. We need to partner with others and collaborate with others in order to be effective. If law enforcement just goes forward with the expectation that victims will be satisfied with the court process, I think we're mistaken. We have to realize that there are specialized advocates in the community from groups like Wavv and others who can do much more than we're able to do. And in addition to that, together there's a lot that we can do that we can't do individually. So partnerships are important, and there are a number of them that we have. Our Domestic Violence Roundtable program,
right.
We have the Roundtable for the Malden District Court that Wavv participates in. We have community-based high-risk domestic violence, high-risk assessment and rapid response teams. Partnerships that we have with hospitals like the Melrose Wakefield Hospital, with you and your department and other police departments. So having these multidisciplinary collaborations are important to assisting victims on the back end when crimes come into the court system, but even before that on the front end to raise awareness and try to prevent crimes through education, through community awareness, and through preventative programming, and we've been doing a lot of that with our community partners.
I think we've done a great job too, Shawn, of getting the word out. A lot of people are of the belief that the police are an agency that responds when you're in trouble. They service the call, they go back to the station, they write the report, case closed. And having interaction like this, we're able to explain to the people that we serve in our communities and across the county that there's more to it. A very small piece of the formula goes to law enforcement. A huge piece goes to education, community outreach, which is, it's the fun part of the job, but it's a part of the job that people really don't see. It's education, and we do that every day. Everybody says, you know, we do enforcement and education, but we see more of the enforcement. People don't see the education, and that's why when we sit down like this and talk, and when D.A. Leone comes out and sits down here and talks about what we're doing, we're making great strides. And I can see that we will go that way in the future. Another thing I'd like to talk to, you mentioned victim compensation. Tell us a little bit about how that works. You know, who decides on what is there, and how would a victim make themselves available to that?
Sure. Victim compensation is one of the rights or provisions of the Victim Bill of Rights. So when I was talking to the community group in Wakefield and going over the Victim Bill of Rights, that was a particular right that people were interested in. Victim compensation is a program that's administered by the Attorney General's office. So Attorney General Martha Coakley, who was a former Middlesex District Attorney, or the Middlesex District Attorney before District Attorney Leone, so she administers that program. And that is a statewide program that has monies that is collected at the federal level from individuals who are convicted of white-collar crimes and have to pay fines. So that money actually goes into a pool that is allocated to the states. In Massachusetts, it's allocated to the Attorney General's office. Martha Coakley's office has a victim compensation division. And our advocates at the District Attorney's office, as well as advocates at other DA's offices across the Commonwealth, as well as police officers and civilian advocates who may work at police departments, can assist victims filing for victim compensation. And victim compensation compensates victims for crime-related expenses. So, and the law was actually recently amended to include some new rights, or forms of coverage that previously didn't exist. But some of the basic rights are compensation for medical expenses, compensation for dental expenses, compensation for counseling, crime scene cleanup, funeral, burial, costs. So to really compensate anybody for crime-related expenses. And that doesn't have to be a correlating criminal case. If there's a report to the police, then a claim can be filed. So our advocates at the District Attorney's office, in addition to other advocates across the Commonwealth, like I said, as well as police departments, can actually file these claims with victims, forward it to the Attorney General's office, and an individual could be awarded up to $25,000 to compensate them for crime-related expenses. There are investigators at the Attorney General's office and advocates who work through that claim process to make sure that victims aren't having to pay money out of their own pocket because they're victims of crime.
Right. You know, this is a perfect example, Shawn, of how everybody works together, and especially in this county. We have the District Attorney's office and people that work over there working with your local and state police to make sure that, you know, we're doing the right thing. But we also have the legislature on board, which is great. To have them on board, have them paying attention to the pieces of the bills that we need legislated. We're very good with our contingent here in this part of the county. You know, with Representative Brodeur, he's been very helpful to us, as well as Senator Clark.
Both former prosecutors themselves.
Well, exactly. They've been there, and to have them to be able to carry water for us up to the legislature to make sure that when we have issues that need to be addressed at that level, we get it done. Can we just go a little bit into domestic violence? Wavv started as the reason Wavv started was because of we saw a spike in domestic violence in Wakefield, and we do watch that. And it has started to grow and grow and grow, and we've involved your office and our office in it. every year, am I correct, around 100 victims do we have in the county, in the state, I'm sorry, who die from, or victims of domestic violence?
In the last year, I believe the number was 26 in Massachusetts. Okay. The number's been about the same for the last few years.
Okay.
But we've seen a spike. I mean, the spike between, I think, 2005 and 2007 was about 250% increase in domestic violence homicides.
Right.
Nationally, it's a growing problem as well. You see homicides, those numbers increasing. One of the questions people have, though, is about the spike in reports of domestic violence. Reports of domestic violence in and of themselves may be indicative of the good work that Wavv and you, Chief, and your staff at the police department are doing, because people are more aware of the rights that exist from shows like this, from community events that Wavv does. And the more people who are aware of rights and feel comfortable coming forward and accessing legal services and the judiciary and local support groups, I think is really representative of people feeling comfortable coming forward. So sometimes I think, we have to assume that more reports doesn't necessarily mean more domestic violence, but that it just means more awareness, which I think says great things about what the social capital in Wakefield and what you and Wavv are doing. But certainly in terms of domestic violence homicides, we have seen increases over the last several years, especially between 2005 and 2007. And the number in 2007 was, I believe, 47. So it's a problem.
It definitely is a problem. And, a lot of people, Shawn, I think it's the appropriate time to mention this, is a lot of people think that victims of domestic violence are within the four corners of the home. And sadly, we have had a domestic violence homicide of a police officer. Officer Ambrose from Springfield PD was killed recently as a result of responding to a domestic violence call. Domestic violence reaches everywhere, every corner of the world, every corner of our society, every corner of our community. And having said that, I'd like to close with that, is that we're making great strides. We're making great strides in preventing violence. We're making great strides in preventing domestic violence. The numbers are going to go up and the numbers are going to go down. You can't control what happens on the street, but we can certainly try to prevent it. We've made people aware of it through groups like Wavv and Respond, and the DA's office working hand in hand with the police and the legislature. I think we're going in the right direction. And I want to personally take this moment to thank you for coming out today and sharing your thoughts, your expertise with us for our community, so we'll know exactly what victims' rights are, what they are, how they can access them, and the good work that's done by you, DA Leone, working in partnership with the local cities and towns within the county. Shawn, I want to thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chief.
Maybe we'll move forward a little bit. We're going to have Wavv on here a little later. Maybe we'll bring you back.
Sure.
If I have my way,
together.
we'll bring you back.
Great.
But thank you very much,
you,
Shawn.
Chief.
Thank you so
Appreciate
much
it.
for your time.
All right.